Y'all know what it is. Jay Williams, Let's Live Life, and we're back. Nastiest Things I Saw in Prison. Vol.2. Shakedown edition. I saw some nasty things get thrown out of dude's cells. Some nasty things discovered during Shakedown. But y'all ain't even really ready for this. But let's relive it. Now, a couple facts real quick. In prison, your cell is your home. It's like your house. You can tell a lot about a person by looking at their cell. By the way the stuff is put up, whether their bed is made, stuff is organized on the shelf. And just like it being your home would be on the streets, anything you don't want the world to know about or to find or to see, you're going to hide in your cell. Just like you would a bag of weed or whatever you're into, you're going to keep it out of sight. But with these shakedowns, if you don't hide it good enough or you get caught off guard, they're going to find it. If this shakedown pops off at 2 o'clock in the morning while you're in bed asleep, you wake up to guards standing there talking about some, don't touch anything, step out the cell. Too late to hide anything. So you're most likely going to get caught with it. Today we're going to talk about that. Now, we had a guy in my pod, 7 Build 100 pod, if anybody's been up Greensville, anybody's done a lot of time, y'all probably know the guy I'm about to talk about. And his name was Grandma. Grandma was old. Grandma was openly gay, but Grandma was so old that I don't think nobody was messing with Grandma in that type of time, you know. He reminded me, y'all gonna think I'm tripping, but like I said, anybody that's ever done time with Grandma will agree. Grandma reminded me of Herbert the Pervert. All jokes aside, that's exactly what Grandma looked like. 100%. If you had to draw Grandma as a cartoon character, he would be Herbert the Pervert. But Grandma talked in like, he tried to talk in like an old woman's voice, like a female's voice. If you could imagine that, but being done by like somebody that's like 80, 85 years old, right? Grandma was harmless. Everybody dealt with Grandma. Grandma sewed. He'd been in the prison forever. And I initially thought that Grandma was in there, you know, I stereotyped him like a lot of dudes do. I thought he was in there for some type of kid charges. You take one look at Grandma, you're like, oh, hell no. You just know he did something, touched something, took something he shouldn't have. But I would come to find out from some of the older dudes, some of the lifers, he actually had a cellie named Bubba. Not what you would think. Bubba wore these round glasses with these pink frames in it. And Bubba had been in prison a long time too. Shorter white guy, really dirty teeth, shaggy hair. But I would come to find out through a bunch of the lifers and other dudes in the pods, you know, that Grandma was a killer. Grandma had been locked up a long time. Was going to die in prison, but he was in there for murder. He was not in there for no funny business. There was a time when Grandma was just a young man doing time in prison, right? Now, I told you pretty much everybody dealt with Grandma. Grandma could sew his ass off. He still had a sewing kit. They had stopped selling them on commissary. His administration was pretty stupid. They thought that people were using those sewing needles to tattoo with. Ain't nobody tattooing with no sewing needle. That shit is going to dig you up. That's a big ass needle. Nobody using that. But they had to find a reason to get rid of the sewing kits. And that's what they did. They blamed it on tattooing. Well, Grandma still had one. So you could bring your sweatpants when you order them. They're just gray sweats. You take Grandma an old white t-shirt and your sweatpants, and he would sew pockets into the sides of them. If you wanted to turn a pair of sweatpants into a pair of shorts, Grandma would sew them up. If you wanted to take a long sleeve t-shirt, have it cut and sewed, Grandma would sew it up. If you wanted a Bama spot in your pants somewhere where you could hide a shank, or you could hide drugs, you could hide whatever and get past the guards with it. Grandma would sew it up. I'd heard so many stories about Grandma that you didn't know what to believe to be real and what to be, fake. Dudes that told me stories of how Grandma would transfer from institute to institute. Like you get sent from one compound across the state to another compound. And certain things you're not going to be able to take with you. Things you pick up along the way that the guards see as illegal or you're not allowed to have. And Grandma would show up at the next institute with it. And it didn't come through in his property. It didn't come through in his pocket. That's right. He shoved it right up on, up in there in his man purse in his prison wallet. Grandma was putting stuff in places he shouldn't be putting them, but he was getting them from point A to point B. We know we're going on Shakedown. A lot of times, I need to explain this to you so you know this also. We got what's called prison.com or inmate.com. That's when all the inmates start rumoring and talking amongst themselves, and things make it back to everybody else. Before we would go on Shakedown, they would bring in these styrofoam trays, almost like what you would get from a restaurant if you get your food to go. And they would, at the chow hall, once we went on lock every day, instead of you going to the chow hall, the food would be put into these styrofoam trays. They'd be closed up. They'd push this cart over there, and everybody would get a styrofoam tray with their meal in it. Well, all these trays, when these trays show up on the loading dock workers are going to come back to the building and say, hey, styrofoam trays just showed up. We're going on lock. And when them styrofoam trays show up, it means you're going on lock. Like we're getting ready to go on a major shakedown. And here in Virginia, we have what's called the annual shakedowns. They do them sometimes. I know it's minimum 2 times a year. My homeboy said now they're doing them 4 times a year. And when this happens, you get up one morning, you brush your teeth, make your coffee, and you wait for your cell door to open. You're standing there looking out into the day room, waiting on the lights to come on, and the lights don't come on. None of the doors pop. Next you know, you see them push the breakfast cart in, start passing out trays through doors. Damn, I'm locked in the cell. Whatever I got in here with me, I'm hit. I'm stuck with. I need to throw it out when they ain't looking, flush it if I can, make sure it's hidden well, because they're coming to tear every single one of these cells apart and tear the pod apart, and then they'll move on. Well, we had heard on this situation, and for in general, we had heard the trays are here. This is on like a Thursday or Friday, and they're gonna wait till a Monday to lock us down, beginning of the week, and we'll stay on lock to probably that Friday evening, that Saturday morning. You're not coming out the cell. Everybody gets word, the trays are here, dudes start panicking. Dudes are, trying to take stuff out in the yard and hide it. They're trying to give it to other dudes, crash test dummies, to hide it. They're looking for all their little secret places to hide stuff, get everything put up. Anything you don't want to get caught with, now is the time. Dudes were going to Grandma, and I've seen several different dudes go over to Grandma's cell. And I didn't know what they had given him, I had an idea that, they're just giving him stuff they don't want to get caught with. I didn't really pay much attention to it. I got my own stuff going on, but, always keep your guard up and pay attention to your surroundings. Like clockwork, that Monday, we go on Shakedown. They come in, they start at cell 1, pull 2 men out at a time, don't touch nothing, step out, your cellie steps out. You strip down butt naked, bend over, squat, cough, lift your sack, all that. Then you put your boxers back on, you step out, and your cellie steps in, and he does the same thing you just did. Now both of y'all step out, cuff up, and they go in and they just flip your cell. They go through your mail, they go through your cosmetics, they're checking toothpaste to make sure there's nothing in there. They are going through everything you own in this cell, looking for anything you're not supposed to have, anything to write your ass a charge for, anything you got more of than you're supposed to have. You're only supposed to have 3 shirts. If you got more than that, they're going to take it. Grandma at the time was in cell 8, and I was in cell 20. And I see him get to grandma's cell, and they tell Bubba, they said, you know, squat, cough, lift your sack, bend over, whatever. He does it. Grandma steps in the cell. This is crazy. I ain't got to even tell this story. They tell grandma to do the same thing, except grandma does it once, and I hear the CO go, no, 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 no. Bend over again. Grandma bends over again. Guard tells, you know, Bubba and grandma, both y'all step in the cell, step back in the cell. He calls the sergeant, gets on the mic, and there's officers throughout the pod going to different cells now, doing this shakedown stuff. But they don't have the sergeant in there. The sergeant, I think, was next door 200 pod, helping them conduct shakedown. He grabs the microphone. Hey, we need a sergeant over 200 pod. Sergeant comes over, and they're over at grandma's cell. We've all got our mirrors sticking out the slot in the door, and if you put your mirror out, you can see, you know, all the way down to the end. You can see what's going on in places that are blind. You can use your mirror and turn it to see what's going on outside the cell. So I got my mirror out the cell. I'm like, what the hell is they doing at grandma's cell? And by now, the sergeant's over there. It's like 3 or 4 more COs. So it's like 5, 6 of them total. And I hear the sergeant, because it's quiet, everybody's trying to listen, tell him, go ahead and get that out of there and give it to me. This takes a couple minutes, and you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. If I had not been there and I had heard it, I would not believe it. After a couple minutes of dealing with grandma and grandma being in the cell and them having, you know, Bubba sitting in there while grandma's in there, they've discovered that when grandma bent over, they seen more than just a butthole. They seen something there that shouldn't be there. Grandma would eventually get it out, and the guards, all the guards wear latex gloves, and they do shakedowns because you never know what you might come across. Some will wear the black baseball gloves with the latex gloves over them, so in case they find a needle, they don't poke themselves, or, you know, you're going to run across a lot of nasty stuff. Grandma eventually gets this thing out, hands it to the sergeant. It is a peanut butter jar with a yellow like top on it. Keefy peanut butter jar that has been cleaned, emptied out, and is packed full of contraband. It's got everything in it from his sewing equipment to tattoo equipment that guys have given him to hold on to. Here, hold my tattoo gun and my bottle of ink. I'll give you some money. He's got all this stuff in his peanut butter jar, and he has hooped it, keisted it, sent it straight up Hershey Highway, and they found it. After dealing with that, I was kind of just messed up in the head that, you know, it's one of the things you sit down on the stool and you're like, God, why are you doing this to me? What did I do to deserve to have to live through something like this, man? This is too much, man. I can't handle this right now. Now, I cannot stress to you enough how weird some of these guys in prison are. For the last 2 stories, I'm sure that wasn't something a lot of people wanted to hear. It's not something I want in my brain, so I'm not going to lie. I'm glad to have gotten it out. Maybe I can move on without any of that shit being stuck in my head anymore, right? But I told you you're going to meet some weird, super weird dudes in prison. Everybody's not a killer. Everybody's not a drug dealer. You got some dudes in there that are just out there in their head. Type of dude that would get locked up in your neighborhood and the whole neighborhood would be like, glad he's gone. We're on the shakedown, and it's everything I've been telling y'all throughout the story that's going on. This next story I'm not going to make as long because I ain't got to get into all the details of what happens with shakedowns. They're in there and they're doing their sweep. They're going cell to cell and they're searching. And we got a dude that lives not many cells, maybe 4 or 5 cells down from me. I don't remember the dude's name. Never really talked to the dude. He was a weird dude. Every time we would go to chow, he would fill his shirt pocket up, and he was a kitchen worker. This dude worked in the morning shift. He worked breakfast, and then it was a different shift that, you know, did lunch and dinner. So he would come back from, you know, working his job in the morning in the chow hall, And he'd always smuggle back little bits of food, not much. But then you would see him at lunch and dinner, and he'd be putting food in his pocket, bread, stuff of that nature. Because he would be out there taking breadcrumbs out of his pocket, throwing them, and all these birds, you're talking seagulls, you're talking crows, you're talking pigeons. These birds would come flying down, eat the little breadcrumbs, but then they would shit all over the sidewalks. It would be a mess. It'd be nasty. So the guards would always, hey, I told you stop throwing bread. Next time I see you throw the bread, you know what I mean, we're going to lock your ass up. Dude was not playing with a full deck, and you're going to realize this real fast. He would just keep throwing the bread every day. They knew he was off in the head. They didn't mess with him. We're back to the beginning of the story. They're shaking down now. We're on our annual. We've been locked down a couple of days. They're up, at his cell, looking at his cell. And like I said, he's like 4 or 5 cells down. And I'm watching out the door, and they're headed towards my cell. And my cellie stashing stuff. And I'm watching, telling him, look, they're at cell such and such. They're at cell such and such. When I see the officer come out with 2 jars, and I can't really see what's in the jars because they're so far away, but everybody's listening. Everybody's trying to hear what's going on, so I can overhear the guards talking. And now other guards are going from where they were shaking down over here to see what this man's got going on. In one jar, just like the jar Grandma had, it's a clear jar with a yellow top. This top's got holes poked all inside of it, and there's grass in this jar. They're looking at the jar first, and they're freaking out about the other jar I'm going to get to in a minute. They're looking at this jar, and they're trying to figure out what's in this jar. Why does he got a jar with holes poked in it and grass in it? And he goes in and tells them, there's a praying mantis in the jar. I found a praying mantis on the fence out on the rec yard. I brought it in. The other jar is for the praying mantis to eat. They get to looking. Sure enough, this dude's got a praying mantis inside this jar that he's keeping as a pet. Y'all ready? The other jar that he had, the other jar that had stuff moving inside of it, was a jar full of roaches. A jar he had brought, was taken to the chow hall with him, collecting live roaches, bringing them back, and he would feed them to the praying mantis. This is an entire jar crawling full of roaches. I overheard the guards talking about it. They were walking down towards where the sergeant was. They showed him. They walked past me. I got a clear view of it. And sure enough, this man had a praying mantis in a jar, and a jar full of cockroaches. He spazzed out. They, throwing the jars away. He flips out in the cell, starts going nuts. They'd already put him back in the cell. Him and his cellmate took him out the cuffs. He's kicking the doors, screaming. He's going crazy over the fact they just took this praying mantis and this jar of roaches, right? And it just kind of left me standing there once again like, dear Lord, I am sorry. I am sorry for everything I've ever done. You let me out of here. I will go on to be Jay Williams, somebody in life. But I can't take no more of this shit, man. This is just too much. Like, why? But yeah, dude had a praying mantis in one jar and a whole bunch of cockroaches that he would take out and drop one of the cockroaches down with the praying mantis and feed it to. You're going to see some crazy things. And I encourage anybody watching, stay out of trouble. Don't go to prison. If you had a hard time listening to the stories I just told, this life ain't for you. You're not about that life. Because when you get there, you're not going to have the option of not hearing it. You're not going to have the option of not seeing it. That becomes your reality. Nothing I said today was a lie. I don't have to lie to kick it. You got to think. On my last bid, it was over 10 years, well over 3,650 days. incarcerated on that one trip. So how many stories do you think I have? I'm only 160 some videos in. I've got so many stories, and there's so many that I can't even yet bring myself to tell you guys because of how graphic they are. There's stories I can't tell you guys because the police never were alerted to what happened. And then there are stories that I'm just not going to ever speak on. So yeah, keep yourself out of trouble so you don't have to sit here and give a nastiest things you saw in prison during lock and shakedown. But anyway, man, y'all know what I'm doing, man. These institutions, detention centers, jails, prisons, they're all just crazier worlds inside of this already crazy world we live in. And like always, I'm just trying to keep y'all entertained. Are you not entertained? And y'all know what this is, man. This is Jay Williams. Let's live life. And to all my real ones and the awesome real ones watching, you're still watching me. Y'all know how we do, man. Salute.